Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hello, really nice to see familiar faces. So, today we'll talk about how to build inclusive organization and teams, especially for the public service. So, just like earlier, when Adam and Adam started off, we can say the same thing about us. So, two white cis women speaking about this kind of topic because we really care about it and we know about our privilege. So, let's start. Human-centered design is inclusive. We use user research to represent diverse backgrounds, different experiences, and different perspectives. And we use these to shape the final product or service. So this is what we've been doing. And I wonder, is it really that inclusive? Because me, myself, I am guilty of recruiting people from my own personal networks because sometimes it's easier, there are time and money constraints. I know that I have not always taken all user groups seriously enough because the main target group was more important. So I wonder if human-centered design is maybe only as inclusive as the designers facilitating it. And I wonder how privileged the culture is that we designers belong to. So my parents were not rich enough so I could study fine art. But I grew up in a socioeconomic background that enabled me to become who I am today. So when I was a kid, I was given books about impressionist painters, and that sparked my interests. I was taken to pottery classes by friends, and when I was 17, I was given a MacBook by my dad, and I could do unpaid internships. So today I understand that these privileges made me who I am and allowed me to make the choices I did. So my parents were not rich enough for me to study fine art, but they were rich enough for me to study design. And with rich, I don't only mean money, I also mean that the culture I grew up in and the design world I've been exposed to. So if you have studied fine art, please take this with a pinch of salt. So today I'm part of those designers who design the world we live in because I work in the public sector. There, not being actively inclusive and failing to consider the needs of marginalized groups can result in excluding those people who are most dependent on public services. Especially because, at least in Germany, people who are working in the public sector are not yet representing all of society. So, for me, it's time to actively build an inclusive design culture. And Nora will tell you how to do it.
Simple job. So we will work or talk about 3 aspects about how to create a more inclusive design culture, which is firstly working on yourself, secondly working on your team, and also working on your projects. And I will start with work on yourself. Which, whenever we talk about inclusion and inclusiveness, we have to think about our biases. I think biases are a topic that also have been discussed, and many of us are aware of them, but still we always have to think about these biases because our brain just loves to use shortcuts to simplify information, and that just leads to those biases. We all know that we are all biased in one way or another, and there are hundreds of different kinds of biases. I won't get into all of them, but one would be stereotyping, which I've also been guilty of. When I did research with a woman, I gave her a legal text and she was applying for social security services, and I just thought, oh, it will be super difficult for her to understand. This will be just what I expected. But turned out she actually used to work as a paralegal, and she was more sufficient and knowledgeable about this topic than I was. So this was one example where I was shown, okay, that was a stereotyping bias I had, and it should be always considered when starting projects. So what if we actively challenged our biases before starting a new project? We brought along some tools. One of them is understanding your biases. You will have a QR code at the end, so you don't have to take a picture of this now. You can just take one at the very end and download this tool if you want to test it out when starting a new project maybe. And this is a helpful tool if you get together maybe with a new team and you actually reflect on what your perspective on the topic is, and then how your perspective was shaped maybe by your own experiences. Also, what kind of role maybe did media play? And the fourth question would be, how are you personally or people you know affected by this topic? And if you realize that none of you are actually affected by this, it might be time to get more members on the team or just put some more effort on the research part, because it's not good if we talk about a topic in a team that none of us are affected by.
Okay.
But how would it look working on a team,
Yes,
Simone?
thank you. So Nora just shared how you can become more aware about your privileges and your biases. This is the first step. Even more important is acting upon it. It's easier to do that if you are part of a diverse team, but creating diverse teams is easier said than done. Probably you've all heard studies about that diverse teams perform better. And as a designer, probably this doesn't come as a surprise, because we use that every day when we gather people for brainstorming or ideation processes. However, this is only true if inclusion is actively being addressed. So there's a study that says diverse teams perform better, but only if they are managed inclusively. If they are not, homogeneous groups are performing even better. So what this means is that when people come together from diverse backgrounds and they don't feel excluded, they may hesitate to fully contribute and bring their talent and work in this team. So this results in a waste of talent and potential, and team members may not bring their full selves. So once you understand this context, it's time to shape the situation so you can deal with it better. I was inspired by Farai Matsima's talk on cultural bias in design and Erin Meyer's book, The Cultural Map. These two, they talk about cultural backgrounds, national cultural backgrounds, and how they become obstacles when working in a team, because these differences can lead to misunderstandings. So Erin Meyer created a framework to make culture visible within teams, and I'd like to introduce you. So she created these 8 scales that represent areas that define team culture and how we work together. They show that cultures and needs vary along a spectrum, and they can be quite opposite and extreme. I believe this framework is valid, not only for national cultural backgrounds, but for other aspects that make teams diverse, such as age, gender, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, physical or cognitive abilities, or socioeconomic backgrounds. Of all these, I'd like to introduce 2 different ones. So the first one is evaluating. Erin Meyer explains that direct negative feedback is provided frankly and bluntly. So negative messages stand alone, they're not softened by any positive ones. On the other side, indirect negative feedback is provided softly, diplomatically. Positive messages are used to wrap around the negative ones. I think it's called a shit sandwich. So I wonder, has anyone ever worked with a German? If so, you probably know that A lot of them might locate themselves here, at least I would. And when I worked in the UK, I was the only German in a team. And in brainstorming sessions, I was quite, well, I would say open, they might say blunt, with my feedback. So, you know, as efficient as I am, I focused on only the negative things because, you know, the good things we don't need to talk about. So this won't work because of X, Y, Z. Probably there's a better idea. And at some point, my boss talked to me, and she gave me feedback. And I was quite happy about it because the positives were clearly outweighing the negatives. And she made a couple of suggestions. She said stuff like, I would suggest, well, okay, you suggest. I do or I don't, let's see. And I was super surprised when she talked about prolonging my probation period. This came as a shock, and I understood that when she made suggestions, actually what she said was, do this now. So she and her team is probably more located on this side. It took me a while to figure it out. In the end, I could keep this job, and I was really happy about it. Another example about scheduling. So, again, there's on one side linear time, which means that project steps are approached in a sequential manner. So one task is completed after the other, one thing at a time, no interruptions. And on the other side, there is flexible time. That means project steps are approached in a much more fluid manner. Changing tasks are opportunities. Many things are dealt with at once, and interruptions are accepted. So the focus is more on adaptability. So my team at PwC, a lot of them are German, like me. Probably they position themselves here, and it fits the organization. It's structured, process-driven. Everyone's time is well respected. However, even stronger than my Germanness is my ADHD brain. So I struggle with one thing at a time, and distractions are always welcome. So I position myself here. I'm lucky because this has been a conversation in our team, and Nora knows this about me. So she understands my needs for fake internal deadlines. So there's enough time before the actual deadline for me to be distracted. So my suggestion is, use this tool. First, locate yourself personally. Where do you sit on these 8 scales? Compare your answers with your team, and then the difficult bit starts. Then it's about what needs to change so everyone feels comfortable and everyone feels included. And probably there will be agreeing, compromising, discussions, maybe even interruptions of the way how you work. But it will come as a positive outcome once you have settled on a team culture that you can share.
By the way, as I saw many cameras, this tool will also be downloadable at the end.
So you need to be aware of the differences, and then you can work on inclusion. And with this, I hand over to you, Nora.
Thank you. So the third thing is working on your projects. And as we already said, we work as service designers for the public sector, which is a huge responsibility as we get to shape how governance provides services for the citizens. And for us, it's a big goal to lower the barriers and just make the services more accessible. And working with the German public sector is not always easy, as Germany is the home of bureaucracy. And I don't know how many of you are from Germany or ever had to interact with the German government. It's, I think, for many people, a struggle. And one of those big challenges is language. So bureaucratic language here in Germany is a huge thing. And there are many barriers that come with it. And the language that is being used by public agencies is quite complex. And that is because this language was created by usually lawyers whose goal is not to make those services and the forms as easy to understand as possible. Their goal is to not being sued and the city or the state not being or just being protected. So here on the right side, you can see my camera roll, which is, I typed in my father's apartment. And so my father came to Germany from Afghanistan in the 90s. No, he actually came in the 80s to study political science in German. So you would think, okay, he should be able to deal with and interact with the public agencies, but it's still a huge struggle. And whenever I visit him, which is quite often, there are always new forms to be filled out or new papers to be sent. So there's always a pile of papers waiting for me, which for me is fine as I work in that field, but I think for many migrant kids, it's just the standard to be the interpreters of the family from an early age on, which to me is quite unfair. So these barriers are there, and they are not just there for people with a migrant background, they are also there for people who have German as their native language. So we try to tackle that, and one of our projects is about eliminating bureaucratic language in the city of Cologne. And what did we do there? We looked at all kinds of forms and realized, okay, there are thousands of forms that are super complex and complicated. We started with one of them, which was in the social services department, because that is a field where the help is much needed. And we brought together a team of public servants, no hierarchies, which is quite unusual for the public sector. And we, of course, worked with an iterative process and tested with diverse citizens. And then we just started on optimizing these forms. And you can see a before and after. I won't bore you with any details, but the original version was one where it was basically just legal text and no explanation. And what we did was we gave it some structure. We used simple language and for example, also canceled the need to sign this document because we asked questions and there was actually no benefit. It was just a thing that was there. So the effects were tremendous. We then tested, of course, with people, and here you can see a person that we tested with who was I think from Morocco, and we gave him the paper and he just immediately pulled out his phone to use a translation app. And we were happy to see that the form in the new version was very well translatable, and he understood and gave us all the information that were needed. And we also tested with the old version, and the app just gave up, almost crashed, because it was like, what is this? So now we want to take it to the next level. This is a little excursion to the total design approach. What we did in the project was working on the visual design, the experience design, and a bit of the service as well. But now we want to really take it to the organizational design. So find out how or what new skills government professionals really need in order to write differently and really have a mindset shift, so to say. And the strategic policy design would be what policies are needed to standardize, for example, easy-to-use language. So that is something we will work on this fall. We will bring together all relevant agencies from the city of Cologne to work on these topics. So, if there is something for you to take away, from my point of view, it would be to use your privilege and start conversations on inclusion if you are in the lucky position to do so. Simone, what would it be for you?
Yeah. So for me, it would be using human-centered design is not enough to build inclusive design cultures. We need to work actively on ourselves, our teams, and our projects to make sure that we are diverse. And I know that you've all been doing that, so what I'd like to share with you is keep up the great work, continue doing what you do, and if you want to give our tools a little try, you can download them with this QR code, and we're really, really looking forward to hearing your stories about change. Thank you.